so I don't know. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Steve, so I can get off the hook.
Well, let's see. I walked out of my company about 10 years ago. Um, I will talk. Actually, I'm not going to talk at all about my career. So I was a social worker for 20 years. I was an at-home dad for about eight. And then I was a managing partner of an investment firm for like another 17 years, basically hiring people. And I think event photography, I'll talk about this, pretty much informed my career choices along the way, or vice versa. I was for a couple of years, the president of the Marin Photography Club, which has about 160 members currently. I think we're the largest club on the West Coast, and was the education chair for a bunch of years. Joining the club 15 years ago was probably the best thing I ever did because it took my photography in directions that I never thought I would be interested in. And I think one of the reasons I do this presentation is I've learned so much from other photographers who've been so generous with their just, hey, try this, look at this, over the years that I just felt like I needed to give back. And this is one way to do it.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to help us tonight. So I've been looking forward to this. So I have big expectations, dude.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me find the right screen. I have a second screen over here for you to look at. I think it's this one. Everyone sees a blank screen?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So, and let me move all of you over to the other side of my screen so you're out of the way. Cool. All right. So let me just say, I'm a voyeur at heart. I mean, that's kind of what I figured out. I love watching people. And event photography for me, one of the three things I love about event photography is it's a window into cultures that I'm not part of. I love going to Holi or going to, gosh, the Pride Parade or the North Beach Italian Parade or you name it, I've been there. And I'm fascinated watching these things and watching people who are so passionate about these cultures that, again, I don't know anything about. Um, Secondly, photographs have power. I did a presentation or a podcast years ago called Photography is an Instrument of Change. And we photographers can be agents of change. A picture truly is worth a thousand words. Um, and it magnifies the message of the groups that we're photographing for. And finally, gosh, going to an event and shooting people, photographing people who want to be photographed is an amazing opportunity to get good at photography, to try different things, to look at composition and storytelling and doing it in a variety of conditions. This is just a real opportunity for me. So again, I think I want to thank Robert for inviting me to do this. I love being able to share what I've learned over many decades. When I look at event photography, I used to look at these guys with these cameras and be just thoroughly intimidated. These guys they're dressed all in white and they've got the big cameras and they know how to use them. And I'm looking at it going, oh gosh, I could never do that. And I'm a fairly introverted person, so the thought of me going out and doing this was no way I was going to do this. But then I realized that every time people get together, the people, all of you, we're all event photographers. We're the ones who bring cameras to gatherings. We're the ones who people say, hey, you're a photographer, take our picture. Um, they're the ones who, whether it's a family gathering, community, or a political event, or concerts or sports, we are the ones who have a camera there. These are all photographs that I've taken in San Francisco from one time or another. They represent a whole variety of events and just shows you the diversity of things that are out there that we can call event photography. When I was president of our camera club, I looked at our statistics one year in the photojournalism competition, and these are 1 year's worth of events that were shown in our club competitions. And they vary everything from local events like Carnival to gosh, bull jumping in Ethiopia and just about everything in between. There are lots and lots of opportunities. So tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and things I've learned along the way. Then I'm going to jump into the literally the weeds of event photography, times for you to pull your pencils out, and I'm going to throw everything that I possibly can at you. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about how to deal with hundreds of thousands of images in post-production. I tend to use Lightroom. Some of you may use other, Apple Photos or some other things, but a lot of these things that I will talk about can be used across platforms. So I have always had a camera with me. Um, 72 years ago, that's me and my dad in uh, Bear Mountain State Park. The guys had come back from World War II with cameras, at least everyone in my family did. And they were all into trying these new handheld cameras that were, and at every event, there was somebody there taking pictures. Boy Scout National Training Center, protest in Washington back in the early 1970s, me doing street counseling on the streets of Boston, and me with 600,000 of my best friends at a Grateful Dead concert. But I was never very good at it. I was really a snapper. I was taking these photos for me so that I could remember these events. I really wasn't concentrating on composition or really anything else. And it wasn't until about 25 years ago I was coaching baseball for my son's team. And at the end of the season, this dad, who I had never really noticed, handed me and my assistant coach these beautiful bound albums of photos. And I was blown away. It's like I never noticed this guy. And I thought, what a wonderful gift. Well, the next season, my son moved to a professional soccer coach instead of me being his coach. And the coach said, I don't want to hear you guys on the sidelines. All you can clap, but I'm the coach. And I'm like, well, gee, I've been coaching for years and playing for years. I can't shut up. Well, you know what? I'm going to grab my little 3 megapixel Canon something, put it on a whatever, and I'm going to take pictures. And at the end of the season, I gave everybody a nice DVD of the season. Everyone was touched. And I did that all through high school. Well, around that time, I went to the local soccer club and I said, you guys need this newfangled thing called a website. They're going, no, we don't. And I said, yes, you do. You will need a website. And tell you what, I will build it for you, which I handcrafted this thing. And I took photos to drive traffic to the website. And I did that for about 10 years. And over the years, I ended up taking or photographing 37 different sports. Somebody asked me about that and I counted them. It's not 37 events, 37 different sports. And if you asked me to name 37 different sports tonight, I couldn't do it. So I have gone up to the top of cardiac every year. I did it again this year, the Dipsy race, the Beta Breakers, Cal Rugby, Stanford water polo, high school basketball, football, and again, the Beta Breakers. And I learned something. I learned, first of all, how to use my camera. I found the knowledge of the sport was helpful. Even of sports like rugby that I didn't play, it was helpful to read about what was going to happen so I knew where to position myself on the field. I learned to pay attention to my backgrounds so that I could simplify the backgrounds. I learned to shoot low. I want my sports heroes to be heroic. And so if you see me on a sideline, I am usually shooting for my knees. Unless, like in this image over here, the Beta Breakers, I could see these guys coming and realized it wasn't one finisher, it was a whole line. So I stood up and take the shot. But you have to be prepared to miss things as well. So those of you who do critiques may look at that picture of the quarterback and go, "Oh, Steve, you missed his feet. They're cut off." And I look at that and I go, "That's not what I missed. What I missed was the other quarterback in the game was Jared Goff, the number one NFL draft pick, and I missed him. Didn't get any shots. But you have to understand that you'll get things and you'll miss things along the way, but there's plenty of opportunities." So my daughter, after Stanford, danced professionally. And about, almost 15 years ago, she called me and said, "Hey, look," and she was doing graphic design as her day job. And she said, "Would you be interested in coming and shooting for the company that I'm with? We don't have money for a photographer." And I said to her, "Oh, so you mean I can actually shoot without sneaking my camera into a performance?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah." So I now shoot for 10 different dance companies in San Francisco. And what I've learned is I look for separation. I understand that a butt shot, like in animal photography, will never be a good photograph. So I don't hit the shutter button. I learned to keep my head on a swivel and look for things that are happening. I look for the decisive moment. I get there early. Here in Grace Cathedral, I got there during a rehearsal so I could see where things were and realize when I came back that night, this was the position that I should be in. Um, I started shooting for other groups rather than myself. And this was an eye opener for me, recognizing that there were other people who were interested in the stories that I was telling through my photography. And how was I going to tell that story to them? What kind of shots were they interested in that I might not be? And this was again, a kind of commitment to community service, paying it forward, but learning along the way that how to shoot for other people. Some of you have shot Carnival in San Francisco. I shot that for a bunch of years. And one year I realized that I was outside the lines, but there were people inside the barriers who had these things called press passes. And I was like, oh, I want one of those. So I did my research and I joined United States Press Agency about 12 or 14 years ago. And it's one of those things I pay $50 a year to be a member of. I don't do it just for the press pass. I've actually uploaded about 80 photojournalism essays to their website that have been used occasionally. But what it's allowed me to do is to apply for press passes at other events. And it gives me some cachet that recognize that I'm not just a photographer out there, but I actually represent somebody. And in many ways, a press pass is my superpower. The photographer Goldsmith said, if you don't have access, your talent level really doesn't matter. And some of you know the term, the fellow Ouija, Asher Feelig. He was a crime photographer in the 40s and 50s in New York, drove around with a police scanner in his car and a big speed graphic, usually got to the sign of this, the scene of break-ins and murders before the police did. And he coined a phrase. It was F8 and be there. And I believe in that, which is if you want a good shot, you've got to go out there and get it. You can't sit at home and think, oh, I can get this. No, you need to go out there and be there. So here's an example of press pass. I had shot the year before's Warriors parades. Some guys allow me to sit in the confetti cannon enclosure. And the next year I went back and they said, well, I'm sorry, our boss said you can't do this anymore. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I don't have a Warriors press pass, but I've got my US press pass. So I walked down about 5 blocks and there were 5 Oakland PD guys inside the barriers. And I held up my pass and I said, hey, I need to be in there. I'm supposed to be on the street. And they looked at me, realized I probably wasn't a terrorist, and let me in. And so this press pass and a little bit of assertiveness is kind of my magic elixir. I'm not a wedding photographer. I do not need that kind of stress, but I've shot a couple of weddings. I've also been hired to shoot a funeral for a matriarch of one of San Francisco's big political families. And what I learned from this was, to my absolute surprise, was the photographers in charge, certainly at a wedding. People look at the photographer and say, where do we want to be? Where do you want us? When do you want us? Even the minister says, where do you want me to stand? And I was shocked. And it was like, okay, great, I can do this. And yet at the funeral, first of all, I was hired by a friend to do this. I had no connection to the family whatsoever. Went home, put on my best 3-piece suit, pretty much shot it at waist level, and then found a place behind a pillar at St. Peter and Paul's Cathedral where I could shoot without anybody seeing me, and took shots that the family was really pleased to have. But in this case, I did my very best to blend in and be a fly on the wall. Some of you may have heard of ProBonoPhoto.org. We are 60 volunteer photographers. We started in January of 2017. We have shot 1,200 events in 38 Bay Area cities. We have 20 million views of our images. And in fact, after the No Kings event last month, in the 4 days following it, we had 1.1 million views of the 30 events that we covered. And as you can see, this is again a picture's worth 1,000 words. It magnifies the messages of the organizations we shoot for, which are not all political. About a third of our coverage are small nonprofits, medical research, immigration assistance, school out in Kenya, who can't afford professional photography. We do not take assignments because we don't want to take money out of the pockets of professional photographers. If the United Way looks at us, we say, no, you can afford professional photography, but our our volunteer photographers go out and we do things like this. And what I take from this is storytelling. How do you tell a story? Stories have beginning, middle, and end. How do we convey the message of the organizations we're shooting for? And then sometimes you find yourself in places where you just don't expect. My wife and I were looking for a place to go pre-pandemic on vacation, and I saw that there was a Buskers Festival up in Kamloops, Alaska. Well, not Alaska, in Canada.
Right.
Well, first of all, shooting at a place called Kamloops was going to be, all right, we're going here. But a Buskers Festival, sure. So I brought my camera, and while my wife was going around looking at these various buskers doing their thing on stage, I was taking photographs. What I realized was this was the first annual Buskers Festival. Nobody had thought to hire a photographer. So afterwards, I sent them all my photos and I said, here, just go ahead and use these. Well, they've been using them ever since to advertise the festival. Just, how cool is that? And then one of the things I'm known for is street photography. I love going out in San Francisco. I get on the ferry once a week and I flip a coin when I got off, decide which way to go. And one day I flipped a coin, decided I would go south towards the ballpark. And I got down to the beginning of Second Street and I saw a bunch of gold painted shovels sitting against a fence and a podium and chairs. And I asked somebody, what's going on here? And they said, oh, this is the opening of the Second Street redevelopment project. The mayor's going to be here and supervisor, et cetera. I said, oh, okay. And I looked around. There was no other once again, no other photographer. Took out my press pass, hung it around my neck, and I started taking pictures. And at some point, I looked up the street and there was a front loader. And I walked up to two DPW guys and I said, so is this the ceremonial bucket of dirt? And they looked at me and said, yeah. I said, where did you put it? Nobody's told us. So I looked around, figure out where the light was coming from, saw there was a low fence at the corner. I said, tell you what, go put it on that corner. So I hopped up on the fence, took this picture, and I tell people this is a bit of accidental history, and it's sad history. So this was taken a week before Ed Lee passed away.
Yeah.
This may be the last picture of him taken at a public event. Standing next to him is Mohammed Nuru. About a month later, the FBI arrested him. I think he's still in jail for bribery and all sorts of bad things. And I said, accidental history, bit of event photography, just being in the right place at the right time and knowing what to do. I think these are just some of me out there on the street doing various things. Street photography is a great learning opportunity. You can't control things, you just need to be prepared. Okay, and to part one. This is where you get your pencils out. So, one of the most important things in event photography is figuring out who you're shooting for. Are you doing this for yourself? That's fine. Do you have some idea of why you're out there with your camera? If you're shooting for somebody else, the big question is who's the key stakeholder in this? Who's going to use your photos? Who's going to be disappointed if you don't get a particular shot? And what we need to understand is the person who recruits you is not necessarily key stakeholders. It may be, hey, Marge, can you go get us a photographer? Or Marge says, hey, I know somebody who can do this. And so she recruits you, but she's two steps removed from the person who's going to use your photographs. And even then, we are the photographers. We know what we can do and what we can't do with our photography. And we may need to lead a discussion with them about what photography, what's the parameters of what we can shoot. Secondly, how are the images going to be used? Press releases, website, marketing photos. When will they need them? Will they need them during the news cycle? When I'm shooting for pro bono photo, I know that if I don't get at least some images that will tell the story in the first few hours after the event, I might as well wait 2 weeks because they need to be in the news cycle. Or they may not, they may be for their next brochure and can wait a while. Are there any must-have priority shots? Are there particular groups? Are there VIPs that are going to be there? Speakers? Do they want creative kinds of things? How active or director? Like with the wedding photography and the funeral, what is their expectations of you as a photographer? And then can I use my images? I'm going to hold the copyright. I'm never going to give the copyright on my images away, but there are times where for some of my clients, I respect that they are going to want to use the images and I will need to ask permission to use them myself. For instance, we sent two photographers to San Quentin last week for a family outing with prisoners, and we know that most of those images cannot be shown publicly. They can be given to the inmates or the families, but they can't be posted. And we want to ask them specifically which ones we can. Um, what kind of access you can have? We have access to the stage or any other locations. When I shoot for the Mill Valley Film Festival, my press pass for the film festival will get me into certain things and won't let me into certain other things. So I want to know, first of all, do they have a press pass of their own? And secondly, what access can I have with it? Is flash going to be allowed? Anywhere. Film festival, I can shoot in the lobby, I can shoot on the street, I can shoot at the step and repeats. I can't shoot in the theaters during the Q&As. And what I need to let them know is if it's going to affect the quality of my images, I want to point that out to them. Is there a schedule I can get to so I can anticipate things? Parking in the city, even for some of my clients where I do things pro bono or for free, I will ask them, if it's $30 for parking, I'm going to ask them to kick in $30 for parking. And then for anyone I'm shooting for money for, I want some kind of contract. I want to agree on the price beforehand, which not only includes my photography, but includes my post-processing. I usually set a limit to how much post-processing I'm going to charge for. Usually it's 4 hours, even though I'm going to do 12, just because people don't understand all the extra work that goes into processing photograph. And then one way or another, whether there's a formal contract or not, I want them some kind of sign off, at least an email that says where I say, here's what you're asking for, here's what I'm going to give you. And they say, okay. This is a shot list and a schedule for the 2018 March for Science. This was held at um, what's the main lake in Oakland? Like any good scientist, they amazingly stayed on the schedule to the minute. They said they were going to, it's at what do you call it? At 1:16, speaker number 4 was going to be on, and sure enough, he walked on the stage. Then they gave us a shot list. We had a couple photographers there. We broke it up, and what I do is I look and write down all the shots that I want to do at that event, and then what I do is I put it on my phone so that I can look at my phone and understand and have it right there in front of me. There's Tom Clancy book, I think, that one of the protagonists, who's a doctor, has this line that I've quoted a million times since then. She says, "If it's not written down, it never happened." I said that to my wife as well. If you want me to do something, put it on, write it down for me, because otherwise it goes right over my head. And so I make sure I have a written list, a shot list before I go somewhere. And this is kind of what it looked like. Busy day, lots of things going on. There were speakers and there were booths and there were people with signs and union folks and all sorts of people were at this. And what happens at an event like this is it is tiring. You're out there for a few hours. In fact, I ran into one of my friends today at the Marin County Fair who photographed Carnival the other day. He was out there for 9 hours and he goes, at age 77, I just can't keep doing this like this. But it's a lot of work. This is the Mill Valley Film Festival. I have a placing shot up here so you know where we are. I have Emma Stone at the step and repeat. I have a sponsor. I snuck down into one of the next to one of the rows and waited for the screen to light up faces. So I got some of the audience. I've got volunteers. And then over here, I probably took about 30 shots from back here. And what I did was, first of all, I waited for all four people to pay attention to what was going on stage. Oftentimes, that's not the case. I got the logo of the Mill Valley Film Festival in there, and I waited until the guy with the microphone gestured, and that was my shot. And I probably have 29 others of these people, but this is the one that tells my story. The night before, I do a checklist of my equipment. I get in the habit of checking my settings and my cards. I erase my cards. There's nothing worse than getting to an event and finding that your memory cards are still full of images that you can't delete and you don't have enough room in your cards for for the event. I actually had this happen to somebody I invited to shoot with me at a dance event about a month ago. He took about seven and realized he was out of space. It was like, oh my goodness. Unfortunately, I was there to take my 1,500 shots and got what I needed. My batteries are charged, my lenses are clean. Twice a year, I make sure I've got it set to set my camera's clock for daylight savings or turn it off. Turn it off. I've got my pockets full of cleaning supplies and batteries and business cards. You can't, and my camera has 13 configurable buttons, 10 more on the function menu, 25 on custom menu, and I use the 80/20 rule, which is those are the things that I will use pretty much all the time. And the 13 configurable buttons on my camera, I can do in the dark. I know which ones they are. Took me a while to learn them, but you want to be able to do that there. You want knowledge of all your equipment before the event. There's no learning on site. I use my flash about twice a year. I usually shoot in natural light. And so every time I use my flash, after all these years, I pull out my manual the day before, put my flash on the camera, and make sure I know how to work it. You can't control the weather. The lighting, don't know, something might break. So I'm trying to anticipate whatever I can. I'm dressing for the event. I ask what the dress is like. It's better to be a little overdressed than underdressed. Technically, I shoot manual, I shoot manual with auto ISO. I choose what focus I want. It's usually either zone focus. Occasionally, if there's a big group of people up there, I might have a point focus. I have one of my buttons on the back of my camera. I use this for wildlife. I set for back button tracking, and this overrides the focus on the front of the camera. As long as I keep that button pushed, I can point the camera in any direction, and it will follow what I targeted. Indoors, I'm using a mid-range zoom. I sold my Sony 24 to 70 in favor of Tamron 28 to 75, 2.8. The Tamron is second generation. My Sony was first generation. The image quality is about the same. The range is about the same, and the Tamron is about half the weight. Outdoors, I use a 28 to 200. Pretty much covers everything I need. I literally at my age, I can't carry two bodies anymore. I've never needed another lens besides these two. Lighting, I would rely on natural lighting as much as possible. Um, and as I said, I shoot auto ISO. I shoot with the lowest ISO possible, but my mantra is get the shot. Choose sensor noise over motion blur. So what I do is, for instance, I did a dance shoot at the Cowl Theater on Monday. I knew I was going to shoot most of it at 6400 ISO. So I set my camera to float from 100 to 6400. And that way I had control over shutter speed, which was 1/400th, my depth of field, which in this case was f2.8, and let the camera worry about ISO. You can fix noise in post, but you can't fix blur. If you take blurry photos, you might as well throw them away. So get the shot. Shoot in RAW. I'm assuming all of you shoot in RAW, or most of you do. If you've got a color cast on your image and it's JPEG and it's burned into a JPEG file, nothing you can do about it. I learned that one the hard way. You're capturing maximum data, especially in low light. And I can spend the next half hour going through a presentation I did on low light photography and how that all works and how your camera deals with it. But I'm going to tell you, RAW is, especially in low light, going to give you a better image and increase. You have a more dynamic range with a RAW image. An 8 big JPEG, you have 56,000 color combinations. 12 to 14-bit RAW, you have 3 trillion color combinations. It's that much of a difference. LED lights, the new LED lights they have in theaters don't play well with electronic shutters. My camera happens to have a variable shutter on it, so I figured out how to use it on Monday after a couple of years now, and I found that at 399.2, sorry, 399.2 sec of a second, I got rid of all the banding that you see with electronic shutter. Otherwise, let mechanical shutter. And then I shoot continuous. Whether I'm shooting a larger group, and you wildlife photographers know this. You have a bird sitting on a perch, the bird takes off, you've got it on burst mode. You've got 30 images you've just taken. But whether I'm shooting that or shooting something happening on a sports field, or I'm shooting a portrait, I shoot on burst mode because people blink, people look away, and I want one of those images to come out. Memory is cheap. It's not like the old days where you pressed your shutter and it was a $1, $1, $1, where these days it's $2, $2, $2. I can fill a memory card and just wipe it out a lot. And I shoot a lot. I shot 1,200 images in 3 pieces on Monday afternoon. That's actually probably less than I usually do. And then I've learned to use the memory settings on my camera. So if I know that's a particular lighting situation that I'm going to encounter at the event, for instance, when I do dance, once I know I've got enough of the piece frozen at still photography, I set one of my shutter buttons at 1/10 of a second, and I do a slow shutter. I've got another one set at 2 seconds, slow shutter. So it allows me to, without having to look or reset my camera up, I can do that, take a burst of a few shots, and then go back to what I went into it with. Technically, this is a golf tournament that I do for Cure Coats Disease at Crystal Springs every year. Everyone wears golf hats. It's midday, and so I use an outdoor fill flash for it. This is the Mill Valley Film Festival. You can see with Kristen Scott Thomas, somebody else's flash went off at the exact same time that I took this image. I've got this horrible shadow. With Aaron Sorkin, I bounced my flash off the ceiling, put the shadow down his back. This is, again, I don't use flash a lot. It's not my forte, but there's ways of using a diffuser or bouncing off the ceiling or paying attention to the shadows. When I'm at an event, I said yeah, I tend to be something of an introvert. I worry about what people are thinking when I'm photographing them. But when I'm at an event, I'm working. I'm committed. I'm probably more confident with that press pass on than I am normally. A smile will get you everything. And so I'm friendly, I'm assertive, I'm very professional. Equanimity is my middle name. I do not let things bother me. My old Boy Scout days, Boy Scout is prepared. I come prepared. The way I deal with my nervousness, including presenting to you all tonight, is being very prepared. And the philosopher Seneca said, and you've heard this statement before, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Like the photograph of Ed Lee, I knew what I've done this before. I knew what I need to do. Here was the opportunity. Take advantage of it. I get places early. This gives me a chance to connect with the staff. My wife is a retired obstetrician gynecologist, and I remember when she was in med school, she came back from, I think, day one in med school and said, they told me that the most important thing that I can do as a doctor is be friends with the nurses. They can make my life miserable or they make my life easy. And in the 40 some odd years she practiced, I think that was true. As a photographer, I connect with the staff. I let them know I take their picture. Um, they can let me know when the important shots are coming up. They can also help me gather groups together for group shots. And when I do events for organizations, one of the things I will ask them for is somebody that can work with me because they know who the VIPs are, they knew who the groups are, and I can ask them to pull the groups together so I can focus on my photography. Gives me a chance to look at the venue, to understand what the lighting is, where the room layout is, where I need to be. If there's a podium, I know that if it's on the left side of the stage and stairs are on the right side of the stage, I know where I need to be to get the shot when someone comes up and shakes hand with the person on the stage. I can map out and kind of look at where these things are and visualize where I'm going to be. And then one of the things that I realized, it took me a while, but I realized that volunteers at events, and you may be aware of this, the senior people in events tend to come back year after year. The volunteers are often there for the very first time. And you, as the photographer, probably know more than they do, especially if you've done the event before. In this case, um, they had set this step and repeat up behind the the garden center in Mill Valley at about 4 o'clock. I've done this before. And I knew that right now at 4 o'clock, it looked great. But at 7 o'clock, when the talent showed up, when Peter Marshall showed up, the light from the forest was going to be filtering through the trees and was going to create awful shadows on their face. And I had an argument with them, but I made the volunteer take the step and repeat and put it on the other side of the courtyard. In this case, I was shooting the Beta Breakers. My school in Kenya used this for many years as a fundraiser. And um, I knew from being, and usually at the beginning of the race, while we're waiting for the finishers to show up, there's me and the Chronicle photographer standing on the finish line, and that's it. But 2 minutes before the before Philemon Chaboy came along here, this truck rolls up that's got stadium bleachers set on, and it's got 30 photographers that have been following the race from right in front of the lead runners. They race up to the finish line. Everybody piles off on it. Well, I knew this. The volunteer who's doing this for the first time didn't know this. And I said, look, you got duct tape over there. You need to put a line of duct tape 30 feet beyond the finish line, and you need to keep all of us behind that line. And sure enough, you get this because when the runners come, they need a little time to slow down, take a breath before anybody moms them. So when you arrive early, you get better access. You get a chance to scout, see things. If you're shooting for an organization, sometimes like my photo club, we do galas every year, but different people run it every year. Well, if I've got a picture of what it looked like last year with all the table setups and where our prints are set up and whatever, it helps the people next year look at that and know where the thing's going to go. It also gives a little pat on the back to the volunteers. I take pictures of them. It encourages them to come out and do this again the following year. Um, And then at the beginning of this, there's a less formal time. People are coming into the venue, there's interactions. It's time when you get some of those VIP pictures with people from the organization and their speakers, and people sometimes can have colorful dressing. It's a fun period, and it's also a time where you can go around and just take these B-roll shots of the organization. This is the Ohana room at the top of Salesforce Tower. There's a group called the Real Options for City Kids down in Visitation Valley. They have a fundraiser up there every year, and one of my friends invited me to come work with him and shoot for them. And it's just a great opportunity to just take some pictures before the events get started. When speakers show up, real minimal gear. I want to blend in. I don't want to be a distraction. I've done enough speaking that I know when somebody blows their nose in front of me that I immediately get distracted. So I don't want to be that person. I want to be just move very slowly, silent mode, no flash, my mid-range zoom. You don't want a long lens and you don't want a really wide lens because there's the distortion that comes in it. With speakers, 1/200th minimum because their mouth is moving and you need to freeze that. Usually an f2.8 to 3.2 gives you plenty of depth of field for the speaker. You don't need more than that. And again, don't worry about noise. Get your 1/200th, f2.8, set auto ISO for as high as you need to be. I take lots of shots from wide angle at 28 millimeters to 55. I do high and low, everything in between. I try and there's a logo on stage. I try and get a picture of the logo in there with at least one of my shots so that, again, pictures telling a story. This is a short light shot that I was able to get, again, gives a little more interest than your standard shot. This is what they call the Deutsch angle from German photography from the 20s. I tilted my camera a little bit to get this. It gives a little more interest than a straight shot. And I give them lots of shots to choose from, and I try and be kind. This is your typical opposition research, opposition shot that the other party's going to use. She looks terrible. This is the kind of photo I will never give to somebody. I'm picking good images. So you've gone to an event. You've got a great spot. This is the perfect place to be. But if you shoot all your pictures from there, it's going to be boring. So move around, change your location, keep your head on a swivel, change your perspective. This is Lions Ballet at Grace Cathedral. I was down on the floor with another friend that I'd brought, and we were shooting here. And I looked up behind me and I realized there was a balcony. So I asked permission. I went up and shot from the balcony, and it just giving different kinds of images. Um, Robert Capa, I think you've heard this before, says if your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough. So sure enough, take all the distractions out of there, get close, make connections with your subject. Be careful with your backgrounds. Pay attention to them. Uh, this is a very distracting photo. I think I'll talk about this later with all this other stuff going around Steve Kerr. I try and tell a story. So go to magazines, newspapers. What do they publish? What do you see there that they publish? Stories have beginning, middle, and end. Take a postcard shot that provides some context, like that picture of the theater in Mill Valley. I try and show the experience through participants' eyes, being at eye level and showing them all the things that are going on. And then the key moments in an event, every time someone comes up on stage and there's a hug or a shake hand, reaction shots. We've heard this with all sorts of photography. If everyone's cameras are pointed this way, turn around, see what's behind you. And so I'm looking for reaction shots of the audience as well. And then if there's a private moment, I try and be sensitive. If someone's in tears, I'm not gonna take that shot. Same thing on the street when I do street photography. I don't shoot homeless people as a rule. Some of that has to do with me being a street counselor in Boston 50 years ago. But just think it's, first of all, low-hanging fruit and it's not respectful for those people, and just don't take those shots. And then once I have my shot list complete, I can go for the more creative shots, the B-level shot, the B-roll shots. These are all images that I took at events that I wasn't asked to do. They weren't on my dance card, but these are all images that the organizations chose to use later and went, oh, that's great. Love that. Let me use that. So more tips. Told you, time for your pencils. Lots of things here. These are called grip and grin events. This is Mark Fishkin and Aaron Sorkin posing for me in front of the step and repeat. This is the one time that I pixel peep. And the reason for that is the talent. Aaron Sorkin, this is the 10,000th time someone's taken his picture. He knows to look right at the camera. He's not going to get distracted by all those things that are going on behind me or the other cameras going on. He's looking at me for me to take this picture. Mark, on the other hand, isn't so experienced. He may be distracted by something behind me. He may blink. And so what I do is I take the picture, I pixel peep, I make sure I got it, because having them come back and say, hey, wait a second, let me take it again, not a problem. They're fine with that. 6 months later, if I didn't get the shot, that they will remember. Step and repeats. Almost every event has one. This is Kate Micucci. This is what it actually looks like. So you can see that she's there in front of this, no distractions behind her, but lots of distractions behind me. Table shots. We've all been asked to shoot people at tables at events. Oftentimes it's what they look like. This is what it should look like. Take the food out of the picture, take the drinks out of the picture, get everybody on one side of the table and get this. This is the shot you want. Group shots. I look at this as M's and W's. So if you look at these people, you can draw an M or a W. What I usually do is I go, can everybody see me with two eyes? That's my starting point. And you see them move around a little bit. And then I'll look at it and go, hey, Alice, yeah, you can see me with two eyes, but you know what? You need to move a little bit to your left over there. And then what I do is, my rule of thumb is I take one photo for every person that's in the picture. So there's 8 people in this picture. I take 8 shots, knowing that one of them is going to be the one I want. And in 3 of the other ones, someone's going to blink or look somewhere else. Smaller groups of people, nice V. Posed shots. These are choreographers for Dominican's dance program. And when they said, we want a shot of you, they were like, teenagers, I don't want, tell you what, I want you all to give me one good pose, and then you can have fun with the next one. And of course, this is the one the organization, the dance program used. This is them having fun afterwards. Video has priority. If I see somebody with a video camera, they're usually on a tripod. I approach them beforehand. I say, hey, look, where are you going to be? How do I stay out of your shot? And work with them. If there's a paid photographer there, I'm going to defer to them 100% of the time. I'm not going to be Uncle Bob who gets in front of a wedding photographer trying to get a paid shot. And then I don't show people eating or drinking, and I wait to have a beer till I get home. Okay, that's that part. And to part 2. Part 3. What do you do when you come home with 300 or 400, or the record is, I brought a guy to a dance performance a couple years ago, and he came back with 6,000 images in a hour-and-a-half performance, and he must have had that thing on video. It was just like took me months to get photos from him. But there are ways to do this. And I want to thank Julianne Kost, Bob Nadatali, Matt Kloskowski. You've heard of some of these folks before. All these tips are from YouTube things that I've watched and learned along the way. First, try to get it right in camera. The more you get right in camera, the less post-processing you have to do. Secondly, work on your images as soon as you get home. Don't wait weeks or months. I know some people have gone on these great wildlife workshops who 2 months later say, I meant to get these photos, but I've got 15,000 of them. I'm never going to get there. I guarantee you 5 years from now, they still will never get to them. When you get home from an event, you kind of know the good shots you got. Go look for those. When I import into Lightroom, I usually have a preset along with my metadata. I'm going to do lens correction for every lens I use. I might as well do that. Adobe Depth Color, I'll talk about that. It's cheating. When I import into Lightroom, it's for some of you Lightroom users, I import with embedded and sidecar previews. What this is, it's the preview we see on the back of our camera. So when we see a picture on the back of our camera, it's a JPEG. It's the JPEG that the Sony or Nikon or Canon or Fuji engineer built into the camera. It's not the raw image. And for those of you who've used things like Photo Mechanic, the reason Photo Mechanic is so fast is because what you're looking at is the JPEG, not the raw image. So in Lightroom, starting about 2 years ago, if you import using embedded and sidecar previews, you're looking at exactly the same image that Photo Mechanic was using, and it makes going from image to image lightning fast. But the other thing you need to do is you go into Preferences, General, and you uncheck the box that says replaces embedded previews with standard previews during idle time, because otherwise you're defeating the whole purpose. While you're sitting there looking at your images, it's going to be changing all these embedded and sidecars into bigger images. And then I import every single image into my computer using a metadata template, and almost every program will allow you to do this. So I go into the import dialog box. I go to metadata. I have a bunch of them all set up, and it kind of looks like this. There's your IPTC images, a variety of other kinds of things. I use SmugMug as my platform. It cares about captions and titles only, but I fill in the copyright information for me personally and contact information for me personally. I also, for some of my work, like my dance photography, I keyworded for dance. Wildlife, I keyworded for wildlife. For birds, I keyworded for birds. And then I save this. And then I attach this metadata template to all the photographs that I'm importing into Lightroom. And I have sold images. I had Delta Airlines contact me for an image that they found through Keep My Keywords and said, "We will buy this from you." And I said, "Sure." I had the local newspaper 2 weeks ago buy a photograph from me that, again, they found through keywording. So I just do this all the time. I use Lightroom's modes. They have grid, survey, compare, and loop modes to cull my images. So the grid view is great for you've got a bird sitting on a branch, and there's only one image that's going to be the one, or maybe three images of the one flying away, but you've got 30 other images. The grid view is a great way to choose just the ones you want. You can do the same thing with loop view. So here's a dancer, and as you can see at the bottom of the slideshow, her leg is going from here to here to here to here. And I could actually pick out the one in this view, the one I was going to keep, and I was going to toss all the other ones. Survey mode. The other night I had, I think the most I had was 8 or 12 images that were all about the same. You can't do more than 4 to 6 images in survey mode at one time without them getting too small. But four is great. Bring four in, pick the best one, delete the other three, bring the next four in, delete the other three, and it's great. And then finally, compare mode. This is amazing. So this is like going to the eye doctor. Do you like A or B? B or C? C or D? What you do is you've got to select, which is the first one in the series, and you've got your compare. If the compare is better than the select, you press the up arrow and it turns the compare into the select and hops over to the next one in the series. And you keep doing that until you've gone through the entire uh, series of photographs and you've picked the best one and you can delete all the rest. So my goal is to quickly cull images to just a select few. I am ruthless in deleting. I don't want um, hundreds of thousands of images on my computer. I just want the ones I care about. including some of the ones that are on the fence. I've gone back and redone images from 2009 with 2025 skills and 2025 technology, and I've made them good. But I know what's going to tell my story. So Juliet Cost talks about giving all your possibles a two and then going through them again and reviewing a second time and changing all the twos to a one if you don't like them. And then I delete all my unwanted images. Once I've got my select few, I'm down to my 100 or whatever. Then I build my one-to-one previews. I go have dinner, I come back, my one-to-one previews are all there ready for editing. And then the first thing I do, especially with my high ISO ones, is do your noise first. And the reason is things like contrast, curves, texture, clarity, dehaze, they all work on your image, and you don't want those applied to the noise. So get rid of the noise so that when you start editing and doing your contrast and your curves adjustments or your texture, it's not doing to the noise also. And then the best tip to be efficient at Lightroom or any software package is just like when we're learning to touch type, learn the shortcuts. 80/20 rule. These shortcuts are 80% of the ones you will ever use in Lightroom. Once you know these, if you can force yourself to not look at your keyboard and just not look at your mouse, but grab your keyboard shortcuts, it won't take long before you know how to use these. So I use Lightroom for 95% of my work. Photoshop when I need to clone things in or out, more for my creative work. But even then, Lightroom's new June release, the remove feature in that is almost as good as Photoshop. I have Topaz Photo AI, and I can talk about that. But Lightroom's denoise and Topaz Photo AI are giving each other a run for the money. They both are good for certain things, not so good about others, but they're programs that I use. And then again, I talked about Adobe's adaptive color that they rolled out in the last year. And my friends and I talk about this as just darn cheating. This is like auto on steroids. I don't know what they did, but if you use adaptive color, especially black and white's not as good, but adaptive color, it gets you about 95% of the way in terms of tonal qualities. And there's a slider there that you can move. It gets you, try it out if you haven't used it before. So choosing images. There's a judge a couple years ago who just kept repeating all night, what's your subject? What's your story? And I took that to heart. And every time I'm looking through my lens, one of what's going through my head is, what is my subject? Why am I taking this picture? What is the story within my frame? What's necessary and what isn't? What is the viewer going to see in the frame? So one of the salons that I'm part of, people will often say, oh, we're critiquing the image, and they go, well, all this is going on around it, and this was happening, and this was happening. You go, but we don't see that. That's not in the frame. So you have to differentiate between what you see and what the viewer doesn't, and concentrate on what the viewer is going to see. I'm looking for action, not boring images, images that elicit some kind of reaction. People talk about color, gesture, and light being the three main parts of an image. I take that to heart. Looking at diversity of image when I'm telling a story, sequences versus single images. For those of you who are competing or doing something in a journalistic kind of way, the image plus the caption equals a story. And in Journalism 101, they teach us who, what, when, where, and why. So either in the image or in the caption, all of those elements need to be there. The rules still apply for all of this. Composition, light, gesture, rules of thirds, border patrol. drives me crazy when I see good photographers leave things intruding in the borders that they could have cropped out. It's distracting. Um, I've got one guy in one of my salons who, for the life of me, and he's an amazing photographer, his horizons are never level. It's like I know when a picture pops up and the sea is like this or the forest is like this. Oh, that's his. So competition images, I know a couple of you compete. I'm going to quickly run through this. Images that are in journalism or event photography, we consider the journalistic value over pictorial quality. They don't misrepresent the truth. We don't manipulate. We don't clone things in or out. We can do sequences. All adjustments must appear natural so that when I give my images to a client, I never apply vignettes to them. They may do that later. If I was going to put this into competition in a non-journalism category, I might put a vignette on it to focus the attention, but not in journalism. Um, for my clients, I create a Lightroom collection. This is an establishing postcard shot. This is actually the photo that Delta Airlines purchased. They were doing a story on trail running. They saw this as something they could use to as a title page, telling a story. I'm looking for connections between people. I talked about this before when people are on stage. You get people like this during a Q&A, and I guarantee you one of them is looking at his lap trying to think about how he's going to answer the question. Somebody else is looking for friends in the audience. And so what I'm waiting for is everybody to pay attention and show some emotion, show and pay attention to what's going on with the story. This is that image with Steve Kerr, awfully distracting. I walked up to the bus, looked up and said, "Hey, Steve." And I got this. Took everything in the background out of the picture. And then these days, there's all sorts of marches and rallies going on with these girls. You point a camera at somebody, what the first thing they do is they smile at you. And I've said this to my pro bono photo photographers. I say, when you point a camera at somebody, if they're carrying signs like this, back in my psych days, they call this cognitive dissonance, people having behaviors that are different from what they're feeling. I look at them and say, don't smile at me. I can't use this if you smile. And then same thing. I've got lots of distractions going on in the background. This is the way I take distractions out. Speakers on stage. And so just as an example, this is a raw image of a uh, no hate against Asians march a couple years ago. This is the edited version of it once I'd taken care of the lighting and moved the highlight slider to the left, brought out some of the shadows. This was another one I used in that sequence, but it's distracting. So this is the cropped image that I used. And then this was the who, what, when, where, and why caption that I used to talk about this. This is a women's march a few years back. I know that there's a small window upstairs in the library stacks that gives me this view of the Civic Center grounds. I'm not the only one who knows about it because I had to wait my turn to take pictures of it. But I got this shot. Again, you've got groups over here. You've got people in the crowd. You've got the mayor, speakers, people with signs. And then because I know that it takes forever for marches to get down Market Street, I went down to the Hyatt Regency ahead of the parade, waited for them to had a sandwich, waiting for them to come, got up to the seventh floor and took this picture. This is at Yerba Buena Center. A friend of mine had asked if I wanted to photograph a band called Quest, a tribute to a band called Quest. So I had access to what they call the group hug beforehand, where the performers get together. I could take my placing shot of the stage. My daughter had danced in this theater before, so I knew there was a rickety spiral staircase in the back. And so I climbed up and took this image from the rafters. I've got my picture of the speakers. I had access to the stage. Again, one thing I asked about. And so I could get up behind them and take these kinds of more creative shots. Skip the needle over here. These women have been using this. I don't know if they use that on an album cover, but they used it in some of their marketing materials. And then let me leave you with this. This is the Pride Parade from a couple years ago. And every year I've shot Pride, there's been a different emotion. I think the year the Supreme Court ruling legalizing gay marriage, everyone was floating about 3 feet off the ground. A year later was Orlando, and everybody was depressed and whatever. And I know my friends who went this year said it was very political. I had an epiphany during this. You're trying to figure out what is the what is the key emphasis that you have at an event. And what I realized was this is all about people. It's all about relationships. And what I started doing was focusing on people's hands. And I just thought that this was the essence of what Pride is all about. It's also the essence of what other events are all about. And I just kept looking for these things that really, for me, told the story of this particular event. And on that note, I'm going to go back here and stop my share and open this up for any questions you have.